On March 1st, 2024, one of the most influential manga creators ever passed away. Akira Toriyama is no longer with us. And today, I want to talk about the incredible impact that he had on my life, the life of so many others, and just anime, manga, just the world in general. My name is Tony Vega. I'm a legally blind content creator. My focus is Japan. I've been doing Japan related content since 2016 when I started japankyo.com. This is Japan Station, where we come to talk about Japan and all things Japan related. The audio version of this show is over on the podcasts, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff. You can subscribe over there, but there is a video version here on YouTube, so you can subscribe, like, and comment as well. Drop me a comment. And if you want to support what I do, you can head on over to Patreon or Ko-fi, join for as little as $1 a month. Links down below. So I do tons of content, Japan Station, all that. I also walked from Kyoto to Tokyo along the Tokaido Road, 500 kilometers. There's a whole video series, link down below here on the YouTube. So go check that out if you haven't already. But today, like I said, let's talk about Akira Toriyama. So Akira Toriyama is the creator of Dragon Ball Z, and tons of other stuff. He's the artist of Chrono Trigger and Dragon Quest. And again, just an incredibly talented individual, has done so much stuff. And he's really, really impacted the lives of so many people around the world. Now, he passed away on March 1st, and it was like a day or two after that where I did a Twitter space, an X space, whatever it's called these days, X, Twitter, whatever. There's these like live broadcasts, and so I do one every week, Saturday mornings, 10 a.m., and it's in Japanese and English. And I started talking about Dragon Ball and Akira Toriyama. This was like a day after the announcement that he had passed away, and I was totally surprised. But when I started talking about this, I started crying. I literally started crying. Like I started laughing at myself because I was surprised at the fact that I was crying, but tears were coming down my face as I was talking about the impact that he has had on the world in general, on my life. Like I did not realize the incredible just influence that he's had on so much of the world, and myself included, until I started verbalizing that. And when I started verbalizing that, I don't know, I was totally caught off guard, but I started crying. And somebody else was there. She was a listener from Japan, and she came on. We were talking, and she started crying too. And we were all just like having, like sharing stories. Oh, like remember when this happened in Dragon Ball, blah blah blah. And we were just talking. It was a very fun space, very fun conversation, but it was just, again, like I was totally surprised and shocked at myself. I normally wouldn't cry at like, oh, the celebrity died. Like, oh wow, oh that's a shame. Okay, because I don't have a direct, I don't know these people, right? But I guess Akira Toriyama has had such an incredible impact on my life that when I started really thinking about it, I just couldn't not cry. It was like it was bizarre. It was bizarre. Like I rarely do that, but it happened. So that's what I motivated me to do this episode, because I wanted to kind of talk about it in a more calm state of mind right now that I've had a couple weeks to kind of digest that. But the reality is that Akira Toriyama has had an incredible, incredible impact. Like he is easily one of the most influential manga creators ever. Of course, there's the giants, right? The Osamu, and of course, when we're talking about like anime in general, there's Hayao Miyazaki, and there's many modern day very influential people, many influential series. But many of these more modern day ones, like One Piece and Naruto, the creators have specifically said that they were influenced by Akira Toriyama. Even Hollywood, there's plenty of examples. I think the one that comes to mind is Man of Steel, the Superman movie by Zack Snyder. It may have been Zack Snyder that said this, or somebody else on the team, the visual effects team, that they specifically looked to Dragon Ball Z for inspiration with the final fight with Zod. So Dragon Ball Z has had an incredible influence inside Japan, outside of Japan, and then it has influenced like the next generation of creators, and they continue to influence people even to this day. Now, One Piece and Naruto and Attack on Titan, all these shows have blown up in the past 20 years or so, but it was really Akira Toriyama in Dragon Ball and Toei, right? The anime specifically, that blew open the floodgates. So I grew up playing Nintendo and watching like some anime-ish kind of stuff. Like for example, a lot of stuff was animated in Japan, like Thundercats and Transformers, but it wasn't anime. Transformers is like this weird thing because it's based on like Japanese toys and all that. But it wasn't like anime, right? Like it wasn't, produced in Japan, original thing and originally for a Japanese audience. Uh but nevertheless, that stuff does creep into you, and then of course the games, and then a few anime properties here or there, like Speed Racer or something like that, right? Like just the early stuff that made it into a little bit more of the mainstream in the US. But it wasn't until I moved to Peru at the age of 10, I think it was 10, when I started to actually watch like more, I don't know, like modern anime, I guess you would say. Specifically, it was Captain Tsubasa, Saint Seiya, and the original Dragon Ball. So the original Dragon Ball was airing, I think it was a rerun probably in Peru, and like Dragon Ball blew up in other countries outside of the US, I think quite a bit before the US. The US was late to the game. Latin America was already huge. It was already being broadcast on TV when I got there. And so I was watching Dragon Ball in Spanish. At the beginning, I'm sure I didn't even realize it was from Japan, but I saw the credits and there were the kanji and all that. So I guess I must have thought like, oh, this is Asian or something. Maybe I knew it was from Japan, but I don't know. I think it took me a little while to figure that out. But I really got into it. I got into those three shows, like I said, and Dragon Ball was just, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. These are like, before Frieza and all that. This is like little kid Goku going on the adventures with Bulma and all that. So I absolutely loved it. And I remember looking at magazines in Spanish, and like, for example, oh my God, it's like Super Saiyan 2 Gohan and all this, and looking at like what was to come, like these just little images, right? And like my mind would go like just uh, uh, going crazy with imagination about all the possibilities where the story would go. And it was just absolutely incredible. So then I moved to Florida, right? So I left Peru and I moved to Florida. And at that point, Dragon Ball hadn't blown up yet. Cartoon Network was not airing it yet. And I remember specifically watching Dragon Ball Z in Spanish because it was being aired on Saturday mornings, and they were further along than they were in the English dub. So I was watching that, and then eventually, Cartoon Network started airing it right on Toonami, and that's when it really blew up. And that's when it went from like fairly niche to just everybody knew Dragon Ball. My friends, everybody knew Dragon Ball. People were wearing Dragon Ball shirts and bootleg merch and buying the fan subs for GT. And it was relatively early internet, so you were getting to like read about what was coming up and the sagas and all this stuff and the games and yeah, it was just a sensation. It was an absolute sensation, and that was slightly before Pokemon, if I remember correctly. Pokemon, that was also a sensation, absolute sensation. Um, but I think Dragon Ball like opened those floodgates a little bit earlier, and plus, like Dragon Ball has a different transition. We're talking about like manga anime versus a game, and then they made an anime to promote the game, so it's a little bit different, and it was also targeted at a younger audience, even in Japan. Whereas Dragon Ball was like cool, right? Like we had like rappers and things like that, like these kind of cool people getting into it, right? So it was a bit different from the Pokemon thing, and like I said, it ended up being so influential for so many creators, right? So influential in not just Japan and beyond. And it wasn't something I really thought about until I started talking about it in that X space that I was mentioning, where I started like verbalizing all this, and that's when it really hit me, like how much of an impact Dragon Ball has had on my life. Now, of course, it's just totally normal, like it's everywhere. Like it's still, in production, right? The manga I think is still running, and I know maybe the manga's not that great. I've heard some stuff. It is what it is, right? But there's also like an anime coming up. There's a new anime coming that was in production. Hopefully, Toriyama sensei got to work on that quite a bit. I sincerely hope that's the case. But whatever, even if it's not good, I still have my memories of the original shows, and the impact that it had on my life, right? Just because like somebody makes a new show, it doesn't ruin what I had already consumed and the impact that it had on my life. And now we have this theme park opening up in Saudi Arabia. Apparently, we don't know when, or when construction will even start. But yeah, there's going to be a theme park in Saudi Arabia coming at some point in the coming years. 7 different zones and this roller coaster with Shenron. And like, uh, I don't know if I'm ever going to go to Saudi Arabia, but it's interesting to see how it has transitioned from this super niche thing, right, in the 80s, and people knew nothing about it in the US, and to this thing that's like, in a sense, like the level of Star Wars or Marvel or something like that, where it has its own theme park. It continues to, unite people of different generations. It's this shared mythology, right? Like so many people, um, like they remember where they were when they watched Goku transform into Super Saiyan, right? Like I was in that space I was mentioning, like when I was talking about Akira Toriyama's passing, and this one speaker from the U.S. He's a little bit older than I am, I think. Yeah, he's a little bit older, and he was saying he was in college at the time, and he was in a fraternity, and they were supposed to go do some event, but that was the day when Goku was supposed to turn Super Saiyan, and so he was on TV. Well, not on TV. He was watching TV, watching Toonami, waiting for that moment, and then his frat brothers show up in his dorm or whatever, and they're like, "Yo, what the fuck, bro? Like, you watching some cartoon? Like, what the hell, bro? Like, we gotta go." He's like, "No, no, no, I gotta watch this." So he watched it, and he saw it, and it was super epic, and the right, like, and he remembers this, and he remembers it. And after that, he went off and he did this fraternity thing, whatever he had to do. But this is a moment in his life where he specifically remembers this, and we all have these like moments, these epic moments where we saw something happen, whether it was Super Saiyan 2 Gohan, or again Super Saiyan Goku, or the end of the show, or the death of whatever character, because a few different characters die, and come back. But we have these specific memories where we were when we were, because they were just it was so impactful. And yes, JoJo, for example, it's incredibly popular right now. Or again, One Piece, one of the most popular top 3 properties out of Japan. But I, it took a while for One Piece to catch on outside of Japan. It didn't do it immediately. And yeah, it took a while for Dragon Ball Z, but Dragon Ball Z is longer and more impactful. I think more people are aware of Goku and Gohan, even if it's in passing, than they are of like a lot of the characters in One Piece. And that's no like insult to One Piece. I've heard incredible things about it. I haven't watched all of it, just some of it, and I've enjoyed what I have seen, and I know it's quite good. But it's just the reality that Dragon Ball Z has the larger impact, in a sense, also because it was the first to kind of break those floodgates open. And then of course there's all the video game stuff, right? There's the Chrono Trigger and the Dragon Quest stuff that Akira Toriyama did, all the artwork. Um, yeah, it's just 68 is not young, but it's also not old, right? There was much more that he could have done. I know he was working on stuff, and so it is sad in that regard. But what he established, what he did, uh, with the original Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, is going to continue impact people for probably generations, because Toei is not going to let that die. No, nor should they. I mean, there's always concerns of over commercialization, but I think there's certainly value in the content and the stories that were told. There's inspiration and motivation and just positivity there that certainly warrants the stories not being forgotten. So um yeah, sometimes it can be over commercialized, but it is what it is, right? So Dragon Ball isn't disappearing. It's still going to be around, and hopefully generations to come are going to be able to enjoy it and appreciate it for what it is, what it stands for, what it represents. Um, I was thinking about, like, what is it about the show that really resonates with so many people, or why did it kind of like get its hooks into us? Of course, the story of adventure and these characters, and the battles, the suspense, the human drama, the emotion. That's all. Yes, that's all there. It's good. But also, like, I think it was just really, really approachable, because we have this very unique world that Akira Toriyama created, right? It's not like Japan in the 1980s, right? And it's just, no, like, you don't have to know anything about Japan. It's relatable. It's everybody starts from zero, right? Like, they're all like characters with human emotions, so it's really relatable from that perspective. But also, everybody starts from zero, right? It's like this world with dinosaurs and magical dragons and aliens and things like that. It's like there's no cultural reference point that you have to be aware of, like the fact that I don't know, like Japanese food is like this or whatever. Like, that's not really that important. The technology is its own unique thing. Akira Toriyama was very good at creating like this kind of interesting, unique technology in his own style that a lot of it doesn't feel really that dated. It feels like its own unique thing. Like Dragon Ball doesn't feel too much like it's stuck in the 80s. It just feels like its own unique world timeline. And I think that's what keeps it fresh for many people, even people that get into it like nowadays, right? It's not like, oh, this is like 1980s or whatever, like it feels so old. Like maybe the animation might feel a little bit old, but the world that's there certainly doesn't feel like immediately dated, right? It feels timeless in a sense, or like this general sense of modern, but you can't quite pinpoint where it is. And I think that's great. That's great because it makes it accessible, it makes it relatable. It's almost like a Star Wars kind of thing. You just accept it as its own world. And like even like nowadays when you see like the modern Star Wars stuff that still uses like the 1970s kind of depiction of technology, it's just become its own thing and you could just kind of take it at face value for what it is. And Dragon Ball, I think, has that aspect to it. So it's just very relatable. And of course, like I said, the fights are awesome and all that, and the transformations and all that. It really pushed things to a next level. And now it's like everybody, does that kind of thing, and we can't help but say like, oh, that's very Dragon Ball ish. And I'm not saying like they're copycatting or whatever. It's just it is what it is because Dragon Ball did it so well that it's become like iconic. So yeah, it's a sad piece of news, but it is what it is. That's the world, and I think we can still rejoice and be happy for what Akira Toriyama gave the world. And if you want to relive that and rewatch it, it's there for you to do so. Um, yeah, it's just incredible to look back on the kind of impact that he has had on the world. So yeah, I'm yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. I'm very glad that I grew up with it, and again, it was a gateway for me. Like my life is about so much about it. My life is Japan, and Dragon Ball was one of the first big gateways that got me into that. So, uh, thank you, Toriyama Sensei. Thank you for that. So, so again, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Tell me your stories. Do you remember when you saw Super Saiyan Goku and all that, or whatever? If you have a moment with Dragon Ball that changed your life or that you remember to this day, drop me a comment. Let me know. I would love to see your stories. And of course, if you want to support the show, Patreon, Kofi, links down below. Would greatly appreciate it. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. And I think with that, I'll see you next time. And hey, let's go Super Saiyan. Yeah! So, see ya.